Before I share the story of how I took control of my life and created something meaningful from the ashes of family disappointment, I want to say this. If you've ever felt like your efforts for your family have gone unnoticed or like your love was taken for granted, I want you to know something important. You matter. Your years of giving, supporting, and caring are not forgotten, even if it feels that way sometimes. If you've been pushed aside, ignored, or made to feel invisible, remember this. Your voice still has power, and it's never too late to take it back. Before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself, I want to share something that helped me find my strength. There's a book called Healthy Boundaries After 60. How to Set Strong Boundaries, Saying No with Grace, Protecting Your Peace, and Strengthening Relationship with Your Children. If you've ever needed a little inspiration, this book could be just what you need. Now, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to her Kindle stories. What's coming next will show you how reclaiming your power can change everything. I stand at the window, staring out at the vast, sun-soaked desert in Scottsdale, Arizona. The orange hues of the setting sun stretch across the sky, casting long shadows over the neighborhood. It's a beautiful sight, one that used to bring me peace. But now all I feel is emptiness. The house feels too quiet, too still. I look at the phone in my hand, waiting, hoping it'll ring. But there's nothing, just silence. Stephen hasn't called in months. And I wonder, is it that hard for him to pick up the phone and say, "Hi, Mom"? Does he even think about me? 5 years ago, my life was a lot different. Robert, my husband, was by my side, and Stephen was still close. But after Robert passed, everything changed. Suddenly, I was alone in this house, with only my memories to keep me company. And it's not just the silence that gets to me. It's the distance. I remember when Stephen used to call me every week just to check in. Those calls meant everything to me. We talked about the little things, what was going on in his life, the kids, even his job. But now, it's like I don't even exist in his world anymore. I can't remember the last time he picked up the phone to call me. Even Brenda, his wife, has seemed distant. I tried to reach out to her once to invite her over for tea, but she always had an excuse. Something came up or she was too busy. And I get it. Life is busy. But it's been years now. The calls, the visits, they've all stopped. I never thought it would end this way. As I stand here, I can't help but think about the way things used to be. When our family would gather around the dinner table for special occasions, when there was laughter and love in the air. Those memories feel like a lifetime ago now. I wonder what went wrong. Was it me? Did I do something that pushed them away? Or has life just gotten in the way? I think back to the last time I saw Stephen and Brenda together, just a few months ago. We had a quiet lunch at my place, and I could feel the distance between us. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes, and the conversations felt forced. They hardly stayed for dessert before rushing off, as if there was somewhere more important to be. I can't remember the last time I heard Stephen say, "I love you, Mom." It's hard to swallow, but maybe it's the truth. He doesn't need me anymore. And maybe I've become a burden to him. I glance at the clock. Another hour has passed, and still no word from Stephen. I know I shouldn't be so disappointed. He's busy, right? Maybe I'm expecting too much. But I can't help the feeling that something is missing. I thought that, as I got older, I'd become more important to my children. But instead, I feel like I'm being left behind. I've spent so many years raising him, supporting him, and trying to be there for him. But now, when I need to feel like I matter to someone, it's like I've disappeared into the background of his life. My fingers hover over the phone, almost ready to dial his number. But then I stop. What's the point? He won't answer. Maybe he's forgotten about me completely. Maybe he doesn't care anymore. I've spent so many years trying to hold our family together, but it feels like I'm the only one still holding on. And the harder I try, the more distant they become. I sit down in my favorite armchair by the window and take a deep breath. I think about Robert. He would have known what to say. He always did. But now, all I have are his old photographs, the quiet reminders of what once was. And maybe, for now, that's enough. But deep down, I know I can't keep waiting forever. There's only so much a person can take. How long do I keep hoping that my son will come back to me? As I sit here, the quietness of the house presses down on me again. I can't help but think back to the years since Robert passed away. Those first few months were the hardest. Of course, grieving my husband, trying to adjust to life without him. But what came after that, the slow and painful drifting away of my son and daughter-in-law, I never saw it coming. At first, I thought it was just the busyness of life. Stephen and Brenda had their careers, their responsibilities. I understood that. I didn't expect them to call every day, but I did expect to hear from them more often. We used to talk about everything, the little things, the big things. I always looked forward to our visits, even if they were brief. But gradually, those visits started happening less and less. I remember the first time I invited them over after Robert passed. Just a simple dinner. Nothing fancy, just a meal like we used to have. I even made his favorite, roast chicken with mashed potatoes, the way we'd done it for years. But Stephen said he was too tired from work, and Brenda never even responded. I tried to understand. People get busy, right? But when I suggested a different date, the response was the same. We've got something else on that weekend. Or maybe next time. It hurt, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was just one of those things. But after a while it became clear they weren't too busy. They just weren't making the effort. The phone calls stopped. The visits stopped. I was left with silence, the kind of silence that eats at your heart, no matter how much you try to ignore it. It wasn't just that they stopped reaching out. It was how Brenda's attitude shifted. I can still remember the last family dinner we had, the last time they came over. There were these long pauses in the conversation, awkward silences that I couldn't fill no matter how hard I tried. Every word felt like it was being measured, as though they were looking down on me, judging me for something I couldn't quite figure out. I remember Brenda looking around the house with that polite smile on her face, but there was something about the way she held herself, so distant. I couldn't shake the feeling that she thought my home was too simple, that I didn't belong in their world anymore. Her comments, though subtle, stung. She mentioned how nice it must be to live a simple life, and how lucky I was to have such a low-maintenance lifestyle. There was a tone in her voice that I couldn't ignore, one that said she didn't understand how I could live like I did. She talked about wealth, how Stephen was doing well in his business, how they were building their dream house. All the while, I could feel the coldness between us growing thicker. I tried to reach out to Stephen, of course. I asked him, point blank, why things had changed. He'd always say, "You know how it is, Mom. We're just busy." But there was no warmth in his words anymore. No understanding. He didn't look at me the way he used to. And that hurt more than anything, seeing the distance in his eyes, the way he avoided answering my questions. One afternoon, after trying to reach him several times, I sat down and realized something I didn't want to face. I had become a stranger to my own son. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about being busy. This was something deeper. This was about them choosing to move on without me. And the more I tried to force things, the more I was met with silence. I remember the last time I reached out to Stephen, just a simple message, "How's everything going? Haven't heard from you in a while." That message went unanswered. No text, no call, nothing. And in that moment, something inside me broke. The son I had raised, the boy I had loved and nurtured, had completely faded away. I felt invisible. That was the turning point. I couldn't keep putting myself through this. I couldn't keep hoping they would come back to me when it was convenient for them. The emotional distance between us had become too wide to ignore. Every time I tried to reach out, it felt like a slap in the face. They didn't want me in their lives, and the silence spoke louder than any words ever could. So I withdrew. I stopped calling. I stopped trying to make plans. It wasn't out of anger. No, I still loved them deeply, but I had to protect myself. It was either that or keep waiting around for something that wasn't coming. And in all honesty, it was easier to focus on my own life than to keep chasing after a relationship that was slipping through my fingers. I started focusing on things that made me happy, my garden, my reading, and even my walks along the neighborhood streets. It wasn't perfect, but it was my life. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace in my own company. But even with that peace, the loneliness still lingered in the background. I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. I had been abandoned. And no matter how many new flowers I planted in my garden or how many books I read, that emptiness never quite went away. I look out the window again, the evening sky now darkening, and I wonder if they ever think about me, if Stephen ever realizes what he's lost. But I can't force him to care. That's the truth I've had to accept. I'm no longer in his life the way I used to be, and maybe that's for the best. But I'll never stop wondering why he turned his back on me, and why he hasn't looked back since. It was an ordinary morning when the news hit me. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, trying to get a little bit of reading done before the day started. The TV was on in the background, just some morning news. But then I heard the words that made my heart stop. Robert's estate valued at $5 million. I nearly spilled my coffee. I looked at the screen, not sure if I was hearing things right. $5 million? How could that be? Robert, my husband, had always been so frugal. We lived comfortably, but we didn't live extravagantly. The man never bought anything without thinking it through 1,000 times. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The news report went on to talk about the estate, the house, some investments, and a few assets Robert had left behind. They said it would take some time to sort through everything, but that it was all going to be legally managed. And just like that, the quiet life Robert and I had built was now a topic of public discussion. The shock of it all was overwhelming. I didn't even know he had that much money saved up. He'd never spoken about it, never made any grand plans for it. We'd always talked about getting by, living a simple life. But now, here I was, hearing about a fortune I never knew existed. As I sat there, letting it sink in, the phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen, expecting it to be a telemarketer or maybe one of my friends checking in. But it wasn't. It was Stephen. "Hey, Mom. We need to talk about the estate." I stared at the message for a moment, trying to process it. Talk about the estate? After everything that had happened? After months of silence? After me trying to reach out? And now he wants to talk about money? The bitterness in my chest bubbled up. Why didn't he reach out for me, for us, when Robert was alive? Why now, when there's money involved? I felt a wave of confusion mixed with anger wash over me. After all this time, all this space between us, now they're interested? It wasn't even just Stephen, it was Brenda too. I could almost hear her voice in my mind, the tone she always used when she wanted something, that calculated sweetness. It didn't take much to figure out what this was about. They weren't calling to ask how I was doing or to catch up on family matters. No, they were reaching out because Robert's estate was suddenly something they could benefit from. And I was left to wonder, how long had they been planning this? How long had they been waiting for Robert's passing to make their move? I took a deep breath and put my phone down. There was a part of me that wanted to lash out, to call Stephen back and tell him off. But I didn't. I had already learned a long time ago that speaking out of anger never helped anything. So I tried to calm myself. I knew what I had to do, but I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversations I'd had with Robert before he passed. We talked about the future, yes, but never about anything this significant. He never mentioned any large sums of money, no hidden funds or secret plans. We always assumed our savings were just that, enough for our future, but nothing more. And now, everything was different. My head was spinning. The house, the money, it was all going to be sorted out by lawyers. But what about me? What about the family ties that had been broken? Could all this wealth repair what had been lost? I picked up the phone again and dialed Stephen's number. It rang, and I felt my heart pounding in my chest. What was I even going to say? Would he even be honest about what was going on? He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice flat. "I saw the news. We really need to talk about the estate. There's a lot to sort out." His words felt like they came from a script. No concern. "No, how are you, Mom?" "Just a business transaction waiting to happen." I took a deep breath before speaking. "I saw the news too, Stephen, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. You haven't been in touch for months, and now you want to talk about money?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost feel him shifting uncomfortably. "Mom, it's not like that," he said. "We just need to figure out the next steps. There's a lot to go through, and we need to—" "I get it." I cut him off, trying to keep my voice steady. "But let me be clear, this estate was never about money for Robert and me. It was about our future, our family. And now, I feel like I'm being pulled into something that doesn't feel right." I could hear him sigh. "Mom, we're family. We just need to discuss it. We'll make it work." His words made me angry, but I didn't want to lose my composure. "You're right, Stephen. We are family, but it's been years since we acted like it. I need to know that this is about more than just money before we talk about anything else." The conversation ended with Stephen promising to meet up soon, but I didn't feel relieved. In fact, I felt even more uneasy. What did they want from me? How could they just show up now, after all this time, expecting me to fall in line? I sat back down in the chair by the window, staring out at the desert. My thoughts were racing. My son, who hadn't thought to call me in months, now suddenly wanted to talk about the money. And Brenda, she was always the one who had her eye on the prize. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing: things had changed. The estate wasn't just about Robert's legacy anymore. It was about the choices I was going to make moving forward. Would I let them into my life again? Or would I keep them at arm's length, as they had done to me? The phone buzzed again, but I didn't pick it up. This was my decision to make. I couldn't let them take control of it. Not this time. I agreed to meet with Stephen and Brenda, though I wasn't sure what to expect. They suggested a coffee shop in Paradise Valley, an upscale neighborhood full of luxurious homes and fancy cars. The kind of place I'd never really felt comfortable in, but it seemed to be where Stephen and Brenda had settled into their new world. I had mixed feelings as I prepared for the meeting. Part of me thought maybe this was my chance. Maybe this was the moment Stephen would realize the mistakes he'd made, and we could start fresh. But the other part of me, the one that had been hurt for so long, wasn't so sure. How many chances could I give him? How many times had I been left standing alone, waiting for him to care? Still, I decided to go. I couldn't let myself believe in a future where I'd never hear Stephen's voice, never see him again, just because of a few disagreements over money. Maybe there was still a way to fix things. Or, at least, that's what I told myself as I drove to the coffee shop. When I walked in, I saw them sitting at a corner table, their faces polite, but somehow distant. Stephen's usual warm smile was missing, replaced by a tight expression that said he wasn't here for a heart-to-heart. And Brenda, she was there, but Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the same look she'd had at family gatherings before, the one that always made me feel like I didn't belong. They both glanced up when I walked in, their eyes quickly shifting away. It was as if they were trying to hide something from me, like they were playing a game I wasn't a part of. I took a seat across from them, my stomach in knots, unsure of how this conversation would unfold. "Thanks for coming, Mom," Stephen said, his voice steady but lacking any real warmth. He cleared his throat before diving straight into the reason we were here. "We need to talk about how we're going to handle the estate." Just like that. Straight to business. No small talk. No checking in to see how I was doing. "No, I've missed you, Mom." Just the estate. The $5 million that had suddenly become the center of everything. I nodded, trying to keep my composure. But inside, a storm was brewing. I'd already known this was coming. I'd already known that this wasn't going to be a conversation about reconnecting. This was about money. And it wasn't even just Stephen, it was Brenda too. She had that look in her eyes, calculating, cold, like she was already thinking about how to get her hands on that money. "I think it's important to split things fairly," Brenda chimed in, her voice smooth, almost too smooth. Stephen has a family to support, and it would make sense if we could, get a portion of the estate to help with things. She didn't say it outright, but the way she said portion made it clear. She was talking about a share, a big one. I couldn't help but feel the anger rise in me. There it was. The manipulation. The coldness behind her sweet words. She wasn't asking for anything fair. She was making demands, treating me like I was just another obstacle between her and the money she felt entitled to. I took a breath, trying to calm myself. I wasn't going to let them bulldoze me. I wasn't going to let Brenda's fake kindness cloud my judgment. They didn't get to just waltz back into my life and demand what they thought they deserved. Not after all these years of silence. "Brenda," I started, my voice firm but controlled. "I've been through a lot. You and Stephen haven't been around for me, and now you want a piece of what Robert and I built together? I don't think that's how this works." Their faces faltered, but only for a second. Stephen's expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of frustration in his eyes. Brenda, on the other hand, crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair, like she was ready to argue. "You've got to understand, Mom," Stephen said, his voice a little more impatient now. "We're just trying to figure this out. It's a lot of money, and it's not like we're asking for everything." His words were calm, but I could hear the edge in his tone. This was no longer about understanding. This was about him wanting to control the situation. I looked at them both, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was seeing them clearly. Stephen, the son I had raised, was no longer the man I knew. He had changed, and in the worst possible way. And Brenda, well, Brenda had always been about what she could get, hadn't she? This wasn't about family. This wasn't about love. This was about control, about getting what they thought they were owed. "I won't be manipulated by you," I said, my voice steady but full of resolve. "You don't get to come in here after everything that's happened and demand anything from me. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I'm not going to let you turn this into something it's not." The room went quiet. I could see Stephen's jaw tighten and Brenda's eyes narrowed, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had spent too many years being quiet, letting them control the narrative. Not anymore. I stood up, pushing my chair back. "I'm not giving you a share of this estate. You want to talk to me? You come to me as family, not as someone who's after what they think they deserve. I won't be part of that." And with that, I walked out. I didn't look back, and I didn't need to. The decision had been made. No matter how hard they tried, they wouldn't manipulate me into giving them something they didn't deserve. As I stepped out into the cool air of the Arizona evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. I was doing what was right for me, not for them. It wasn't about the money. It was about standing up for myself. And I wasn't going to let them change that. They had their chance, and they blew it. Now it was my turn. After leaving the coffee shop, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. The anger I'd felt in that moment had settled into a heavy sense of sadness. I knew what I had to do, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. Could I really cut ties with Stephen? Was I being too harsh? Or was this my last chance to save whatever was left of our relationship? As I sat in my favorite chair, the silence of the house surrounding me, I kept thinking about my grandchildren. I love them more than anything. They didn't deserve to suffer because of their parents' mistakes. They were innocent in all of this. They deserved a chance, a future. And then the thought hit me, maybe there was still a way to offer something to them, something positive. But only if Stephen and Brenda were willing to meet me halfway. I thought long and hard about it. After everything that had happened, they didn't deserve to just get their hands on the estate. But I could help my grandchildren. I could create a trust fund for their education, something that would give them opportunities. But here was the catch. It had to be conditional. They couldn't just expect money to come without any effort. If they wanted something, they had to prove they were willing to work for it. I was tired of being treated like I was a source of income instead of a mother, a person who deserved respect. So I made my decision. I would offer them one last chance, but this time the terms would be clear. If they wanted my help, they'd have to fix the relationship. Not just a casual phone call or a nice dinner. They would have to show me that they cared enough to put in the work. I called Stephen, my hand shaking slightly as I pressed the dial button. I didn't know what his reaction would be, but I had to give this a try. This was the last thing I could offer before I completely gave up. When he answered, his voice was tight, almost nervous. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything you said. Are you ready to talk?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Yes, Stephen. I've been thinking too. Here's what I'll do. I'll create a trust fund for the kids, for their education. But there's one condition. You and Brenda have to agree to attend family counseling with me for 1 year. We'll work on rebuilding this relationship, but you have to show me that you're willing to make the effort." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, his silence heavy, and then finally he spoke. "Mom, counseling? Seriously? You want us to go to therapy just to get money? This is ridiculous." I felt my stomach tighten. "It's not just about the money, Stephen. This is about fixing what's broken between us. I can't keep doing this, waiting for you to come around while you and Brenda ignore me. I'm offering you a chance to prove you want a real relationship. But if you won't even try, then I can't help you." His voice grew colder. "This is just manipulation. You're trying to control us. We don't need therapy. We just need our fair share." I could feel my heart sinking. Every word he said made it clearer. They didn't want to fix things. They didn't want to work on anything. They just wanted what they thought they were owed. It wasn't about family. It wasn't about love. It was just about getting their hands on the money. "I'm not controlling anything," I said quietly, trying to stay calm. "I'm giving you a chance. A real chance. But if you can't even meet me halfway, then I'm done. I can't keep letting you use me." There was another pause, and then Stephen's voice came through, strained with anger. "Fine. If that's what it's going to be, then I don't want any part of it. You can keep your money. We'll figure it out on our own." I felt the weight of his words. A deep sadness washed over me. This was the moment I knew it was over. They hadn't changed. They weren't interested in fixing anything. They just wanted what they could get. I had spent so many years trying to hold our family together, but Now I realized that maybe I was the only one still trying. All right, Stephen, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I guess this is it. You've made your choice. I ended the call and sat back in the chair, feeling an emptiness I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was just resignation. I had done everything I could. I had offered them a way back into my life, a way to fix what was broken, but they didn't want it. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't keep waiting. I couldn't keep hoping for something that wasn't coming. I had to let go. I had to accept that Stephen and Brenda had made their choices, and it wasn't up to me to change them. I looked out the window, the Arizona sun setting in the distance, and I knew what I had to do next. I wasn't going to let their rejection control my life anymore. I was going to focus on what truly mattered, the future, my peace, and the things I could build with my own hands. The foundation, the trust for my grandchildren, and the legacy I would leave. Those were the things that mattered. And those were the things I was going to build, no matter what Stephen and Brenda thought. This was my life now, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. After the call ended, I sat there in silence, letting everything settle in. I was shaken, yes, but also clear-headed in a way I hadn't been in a long time. As much as I had hoped for a different outcome, I knew now that I had to stop holding on to something that wasn't coming back. The years of trying to please Stephen and Brenda, the hopes I had that they'd come around, it was over. I couldn't keep fighting for them if they weren't willing to fight for me. But there was something I could do, something that would honor Robert's memory, something that would mean more than money ever could. I looked at the estate as a final chance to do something good with all of it. I knew Robert had always believed in helping others, especially those who had to work hard to make a life for themselves. That's when it hit me. I could use the inheritance for something bigger than myself. I decided to establish a $5 million scholarship for single mothers. It wasn't a plan I had been working on for years. It was something Robert had quietly been considering before he passed. He told me once in passing that he wanted to leave something behind that would help women who had struggled, who had faced the same challenges I had when raising Stephen alone. He had always wanted to help, but never got the chance to make that vision a reality. Now, I would make sure it happened. I felt a sense of peace wash over me as I thought about the women who would benefit from this scholarship. I knew how hard it was, how lonely it could feel, how difficult it was to balance raising children and trying to make ends meet. I had done it myself. I had struggled. I had worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, to make sure Stephen had what he needed, even when everything seemed impossible. And now I could offer that same hope to other women, to give them a fighting chance. This scholarship wasn't just about money. It was about creating opportunities, about giving women a way to move forward, to build better lives for themselves and their children. It was a legacy, one that would last long after I was gone, something that mattered more than any family squabble or any inheritance battle. I called my financial advisor the next morning. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone, but I knew I had made the right decision. I'm ready to move forward with the foundation. I told him, I want to set up a scholarship for single mothers. It needs to be established properly, and I want to make sure it's something that will truly help. He was quiet for a moment, probably surprised by the sudden change of direction. Of course, Audrey, he finally said. We'll get started right away. As I sat back in my chair after the call, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was the right thing to do. It wasn't about revenge or punishment. It wasn't about holding on to the money and letting it fester in bitterness. It was about creating something positive from all the hurt. I wasn't going to let Stephen and Brenda's actions define the rest of my life. I would choose how my story would unfold from here on out. I knew I had lost my son. I knew that the relationship we had once shared was gone, probably for good. But I hadn't lost everything. I still had my integrity, and I still had the ability to make a difference. I still had the chance to do something meaningful with my life. The thought of helping women who had been through similar struggles made me feel grounded. For the first time in years, I felt like I was taking control again, like I was no longer a victim of my circumstances. I was creating a future that mattered. As I made the plans for the scholarship, I thought about Robert again. He had been the one who'd always believed in me, the one who had supported me when I needed it most. And now, through this scholarship, I could honor his memory. I could make sure his legacy lived on in the lives of women who would never get the recognition they deserved, just like I hadn't all those years ago. I had to admit, though, that the process wasn't easy. There were forms to fill out, meetings to attend, legal steps to take. But with each step, I felt more and more sure of my decision. I wasn't just handling money, I was building something. I was creating hope. And with that hope came the strength to finally let go of the past. A few weeks later, the foundation was officially set up, and I was ready to announce it. It wasn't just a financial venture, it was a mission to give single mothers the chance they deserved. And it felt good, better than anything I had expected. I hadn't given up on my family, not really, but I had learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about those who show up, those who care. And right now, my focus was on creating something meaningful for the women who had been overlooked, just like I had been. As I finalized the paperwork and prepared for the official announcement, I took a moment to reflect. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of my son's expectations, hoping for something I would never get. But now, I was living for myself, and it felt like freedom. I didn't need Stephen's approval anymore. I didn't need Brenda's approval. What I needed was to feel like I had done something right. And I was finally getting there. Now, I was ready to see where this journey would take me. The legacy I was building wasn't just for me, it was for those who truly needed it. And that was all the validation I needed. When I announced the foundation, I didn't expect the response I got. The news about the scholarship spread quickly. I received messages from all over, neighbors, old friends, even strangers, thanking me for doing something so meaningful. People were moved by the decision to use Robert's estate for something that would truly make a difference in the lives of others. They admired my choice to help single mothers, women who had worked as hard as I had to raise their children while struggling to make ends meet. The media picked up on the story too. The news outlets were quick to highlight how the estate, which could have been consumed by family conflict, was now going toward a cause that would help people for years to come. I found myself on local television, doing interviews about the foundation, explaining how important it was to me to leave behind a legacy of support, not just wealth. It felt good to hear the praise. It felt good to know that my decision to help others was the right one. But more than anything, it felt freeing. It was the kind of fulfillment I hadn't known in years. I hadn't realized how much weight I'd been carrying until I felt it lift, little by little, as the foundation began to grow. But as expected, there was a ripple effect in the family. Stephen didn't call me after the meeting, but when the story about the scholarship broke, he tried again. I saw the message on my phone one afternoon while I was working on some paperwork for the foundation. It was Stephen. "Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I did. I want to make things right. Please, can we talk? I've been thinking about everything." For a moment, I hesitated. I really did. I didn't want to close the door on him completely, but I knew that if I gave in, I'd only be inviting the same behavior that had hurt me for years. I had already offered him a chance, and he refused. I had made my decision, so I didn't respond. I couldn't let him think that he could waltz back into my life, especially now that everything had come to a head. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. And Stephen and Brenda hadn't respected me in years. The calls kept coming. At first, it was Stephen, then Brenda. I couldn't bring myself to listen to their voicemails. Each time I saw their names pop up on my phone, my heart would race, but my decision remained firm. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me for the sake of their own gain. As news of the scholarship spread, I could see the contrast between what I had done and what Stephen was now facing. He was struggling. His business wasn't doing as well as he had hoped, and it was clear that the pressure was getting to him. The reality of his financial situation was starting to unfold in front of everyone, and it wasn't pretty. Meanwhile, my decision to focus on giving back rather than succumbing to their demands was standing strong. There I was using Robert's estate to create something that would last, a positive, impactful legacy. And there Stephen was struggling to hold on to what he thought he deserved. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about who had the strength to make it through life with integrity. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. As much as it hurt to cut him off, I knew it was the right decision. Watching Stephen's financial troubles unfold, I couldn't help but think back to all the times I'd been there for him, holding things together, trying to make the best of it. But I realized now that I'd been holding on for far too long while he was slipping away from me, unable to see the bigger picture. The more I focused on the foundation, the more I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I spent my days meeting with women in the community, hearing their stories, and learning about the struggles they faced. The scholarship program wasn't just about money, it was about hope. It was about showing these women that they didn't have to do it all alone, that they had a community backing them. And as I helped more women, I found myself healing little by little. The pain of losing my son, of seeing him make choices I couldn't understand, didn't go away, but it became easier to manage. Every time I saw a woman graduate from a program funded by the scholarship, every time I heard a success story, I felt a sense of fulfillment I had never imagined. The more I worked on the foundation, the more I realized how much of my energy I had wasted trying to please people who didn't value me. It had taken me far too long to understand that love doesn't always come with strings attached, and sometimes the hardest part of loving is letting go. I wasn't going to chase after a relationship with Stephen anymore. I was going to let him find his own way, just like I had to find mine. And now, I had something that truly mattered. I had a purpose. I had the ability to create change, to leave behind something that would help people long after I was gone. I didn't need Stephen's approval, and I didn't need Brenda's false politeness. What I needed was to continue building this foundation, to continue helping the women who were counting on me. As I looked out the window again, the sun setting over the Arizona desert, I finally felt a sense of peace. I knew I had made the right decision, not just for me, but for the future. And for the first time in a long while, I was truly proud of the path I had chosen. My story wasn't over yet. There was so much more to do. Things have changed more than I ever thought they could. As the weeks passed after setting up the foundation, I found myself surrounded by people who actually saw me, not for the money, not for what I could give them, but for what I could do, for what we could build together. I had become part of a community of people who were all focused on something greater than themselves. Women, just like I once was, trying to make it on their own and looking for a little bit of hope. I had that hope now, and it felt like the most precious gift I could give. The scholarship was making an impact. One by one, single mothers started reaching out to me, sharing their stories, telling me how the scholarship was changing their lives. I couldn't help but feel pride in what we had created. I was no longer just Audrey Duncan, the mother who'd been cast aside. I was Audrey Duncan, the woman who'd taken a painful chapter of her life and turned it into something powerful, something that could help others. I didn't need to hear from Stephen or Brenda anymore. They had their chance. It was painful, yes, but as each woman shared her story with me, as I watched their children's futures change because of what we had built, I realized something I hadn't understood before. My worth wasn't tied to my family's approval. I didn't need them to see me or validate me. I was enough on my own. It took me years to understand that. I spent so much of my life trying to earn the love of people who couldn't or wouldn't give it to me. I gave so much of myself, but I didn't get what I needed in return. And now, for the first time, I was learning to give that love to myself, to take what I had been through, the pain, the loneliness, the rejection, and turn it into something that mattered. As I sat in my office, reviewing applications for the scholarship, I looked out the window. The sun was setting over the same desert landscape that had been there when I first decided to take this path. The colors in the sky were as beautiful as they'd always been, but now they felt like a reflection of the freedom I had finally found. I wasn't tied down by the past anymore. I wasn't carrying the weight of my son's rejection on my shoulders. I didn't need to wait for his call or Brenda's manipulation. I didn't need them to understand my decisions. The women I was helping, those single mothers who had struggled just like I had, were the ones who truly mattered. I had given them a chance to change their lives, and that felt better than any apology or reconciliation ever could. I thought about Robert, too. I knew he'd be proud of what we were doing with the estate. He'd always believed in helping others, even when he was quietly setting aside money for something bigger. The foundation was his legacy as much as it was mine, and that felt like the perfect way to honor him. It wasn't easy to get here, and it wasn't quick. There were times when I felt like giving up, like I couldn't keep moving forward with the weight of everything on me. But now, sitting in this moment of peace, I knew I had done the right thing. I had made something good come from all the bad, and that, in the end, was all I could control. I took one last look out the window as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The sky was fading into twilight, and I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't alone anymore. I had found my purpose, and in doing so, I had found my peace. And so I moved forward, not with regret, not with bitterness, but with a deep sense of fulfillment. I had done the work. I had made the hard choices. And now I was ready to see where this new chapter would take me. Now let me ask you, have you ever had to let go of a relationship that wasn't healthy? How did you find the strength to move on? Share your thoughts with me in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story, and I'm sure others would too. Let's keep this conversation going. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you found this story helpful. Your support means more than you know. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me. Lastly, remember to download this wonderful book called Healthy Boundaries After 60, How to Set Strong Boundaries, Saying No with Grace, Protecting Your Peace, and Strengthening Relationship with Your Children. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on her Kindle Stories.